Hey guys, Dimitri here. Welcome to my messy garage. Just got done getting ready for Battle of Goats this weekend, and I've got this big pile of used tires here, and I've got three different 140s. So I thought I'd share some opinions that I have after running all of these recently. All right, so the tires in question, the Dunlop EN91EX, the Bridgestone E50 Extreme, and the Kenda Knarly. So I've only had one Bridgestone. I've ran a couple Gnarlies, and I don't even know how many of these Dunlops. I've got two on the bikes right now, and I've got another one here, so I probably ran like a half a dozen Dunlops. And as you can tell from that, the Dunlop is definitely my favorite tire. They're all pretty similarly priced, with the Kenda being the cheapest. And they all have somewhat different characteristics, I would say. Overall, I think the Dunlop works the best. The Dunlop has probably the stickiest tire rubber. The Dunlop is not quite as wide as the Kenda, but it is very stable, and it actually works pretty well even at speed. This is, I think, is the tire that I just took off my bike, and as you can see, it's very worn out. And we did a ride here a few weeks back that was a pretty fast Michigan single track ride, and I'm running on a Moose that's probably 2 psi, and it still is very stable. I really didn't have too much problem with this tire at all. I ran the same trail with a tire with a tube in it at like 12 psi, actually the same tire, just not the gummy version, and I really didn't notice any difference in stability. So this tire does really well both at low and higher speeds. First thing, as far as comparing them though, that I wanted to talk about really is the shape. So they are actually very different shapes. So we'll start with the Bridgestone. The Bridgestone is the narrowest and it is the roundest, and it is very noticeable. So it turns really well. So if you're riding faster single track, it actually feels really good. Where it suffers is on like loose rocky terrain. I really noticed the decrease in stability. So it just rolls around side to side, especially if you're on the stiffer side with your Moose or tubeless or whatever you're running. You really have to run this tire at like to max 4 psi equivalent. Otherwise, it is very round, and the sidewalls and everything on this tire are also pretty hard. So you end up really kind of suffering in terms of traction. I do think it side hills really well because of its stiff sidewalls, and it's got a lot of knobs on the side. It also wears pretty well. So this tire has, I don't know how many hours on it, but it actually starts chunking knobs, but the knobs stay in place. And this was me riding a lot of Southern California desert. So even here, the knob kind of fell off, but it doesn't rip all the way off. So the rubber is actually really durable, but it's still pretty sticky. So I will say personally, for the kind of riding that I like to do, this is my least favorite tire. I did another review on it, and I'm really not a huge fan. It's not very predictable in most situations, and it just doesn't have as much raw grip as the others. And it's also not that cheap. It's comparable, I think, in price to the Dunlop. I mostly only got it because that was the only tire I could really get for TKO. There was kind of a weird shortage last summer. So next up, I'll talk about the Kenda Knarly. And I actually like this tire more than the Bridgestone. I think it has a more raw grip, especially forward and back, which you can see because it is very wide. One other thing to mention about the Bridgestone, by the way, it takes a smaller Moose than most 140s. I actually ended up running a Nitro Moose 305 in it, because the 325, which is technically the 140 Moose in Nitro Moose sizing, was too big. It was way too stiff, so I had to put a smaller moose in it to get it to kind of that really soft pressure. All right, Kenda Knarly. I actually really like this tire. I think it is a very underrated tire. Pretty inexpensive. It lasts a long time, and even when it wears out, it still grips well. The rubber compound, I feel like, is not quite as soft, but it's so wide that it just tractors up anything. It is awesome. And the sidewalls and everything are the sidewalls are actually pretty reasonably stiff, so it does handle pretty well. You don't feel like you're riding on a marshmallow. But the thing that it doesn't do super well is it doesn't side hill very well, just because it is so wide and so flat. And then if you look at it from kind of, I don't know what the good angle is, but there's really no knobs on the side. So once you're kind of past this, if you're in really off camber situation, there's not much there to keep you on that off camber. So great tire, especially on a budget, especially if you're just riding a lot of really slick stuff where you're just stuck in a creek forever. This tire works super well, and I actually really like it. That's probably my go-to for budget tires, maybe behind the JX8. All right, Dunlop EN91EX. This is what a lot of pros run that run Dunlop, and a lot of really good riders in general, because it is probably comparable to the Michelin Extreme or the Plus Extreme, one of the kind of pro hard enduro tires. The rubber compound in it is really soft. The profile overall is round-ish, but not nearly as round as the Bridgestone. And you can really feel this, because this tire is hella stable, like very stable, and you can just do some hero lines in this thing. Even when it's worn out, even when it's flipped, it just grips so well, and it is very predictable. And I think that is my main favorite thing about the Dunlop, is that pretty much regardless of the terrain or speed, it is a very predictable tire. You know exactly what it's going to do. It doesn't have that feeling of that the Bridgestone has, where it will slip and then it will grip really aggressively. And I've looped my bike out a couple times just because of that tendency that the Bridgestone has. This will have very consistent grip from the moment you start putting power down to forever. So I really like that about it. It also side hills really well, because it does have these knobs that are pretty much on this, almost on the side of the tire. They're at like a 45-degree angle from the sidewall. So it makes it work really well. So I'll talk a little bit about wear on all three tires. It's about the same. They all wear pretty quickly if you spin the tire at all, or they last forever if you don't. So I think it is important to pick a tire where you're not going to spin a ton. And I will say pretty much all of them work pretty well, even when they're worn out, with the EN91EX probably being the best one. And the EN91EX is also the tire that I found has the least tendency to rip knobs off. I don't think I've ripped a single knob off of it. There's chunks that will come off, but not an entire knob. So hopefully you guys found this comparison of the EN91EX, E50, and the Knarly helpful. If you have any questions or comments or experiences you want to share, definitely leave a comment, and I'll see you out on the trails or Battle the Goats.